Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. We have been doing a lot of episodes lately, but they're all super good and important, so we're going to keep doing it as long as there's important stories or topics to cover. It is July 19th, 2017. I'm joined by my brilliant and inspiring wife.
Oh, right back at you. Margi, glad to be here.
And we're doing our weekly Mormon Stories / Mormon Transitions episode where Margi and I talk about practical themes dealing with the lived Mormon and progressive Mormon and post-Mormon experience. So that's what we're doing today. Today, we're really excited to be joined again by Dr. Julie DeAzevedo Hanks. We'll be introducing her in a second, but recently, she re-released a blog post that she had released a year or two ago called 30 Questions Nobody Asks My Husband at Church. This is a set of questions or a theme probably around women and gender roles and women working and Mormon women working and maybe even, dare we say feminism? Is that scary? Yeah, feminism. So it's an article that caught a lot of attention, and we thought it would be really fun and interesting to bring Julie on to talk about it. Also, because there are a couple events coming up that Julie's a part of that we thought it would be nice to kind of do some co-promotion. So I will just go ahead and make a few very quick announcements. The first is that Julie will be holding a workshop next week. And so, Julie, even though I haven't introduced you yet, tell our listeners really quickly about your workshop and how they can sign up, what it's about and how they can sign up.
Sure. It's a Sunstone pre-conference called Finding Your Voice as a Mormon Woman. And you can get information and sign up on drjuliehanks.com/voice. Has all the information. It's a day-long workshop, a lot of interaction, discussion. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Sounds exciting.
All right. So we'll make sure and add that to the show notes so that people can click on it and register. Thanks for letting us know about that, Julie. And there are a few other things. Julie and I will be co-leading a retreat, a 2-day retreat for couples who are in mixed faith marriages. We wanted it to be 50-50, half believers, half semi-believers or non-believers. And it's going to be in Salt Lake or Utah County. I think we're finalizing the location, August 11th through 12th. You go to mormonstories.org/events to sign up for that. And it's going to be powerful. We've already have 40 people signed up, 20 couples. There may be a few more slots, but do not wait if you want to join us because definitely slots are running out. We have a few more things. Seattle, Washington, September 14th and 15th. We're coming to bring a Mormon Stories workshop there. October 20th through 22nd, we'll be in Sydney, Australia. We'd love to see you there for retreat with Dr. Gina Colvin. Really excited about that. November 9th through 10th in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we're taking nominations for events in 2018. So if you want us to bring either a workshop or a retreat to you, we would love to hear about it. You can email us at mormonstories@gmail.com and let us know. Houston is expressing interest. Washington, D.C. has expressed interest. Chicago has expressed interest. Idaho has expressed interest, both Boise and Southern Idaho. So raise your voice if you want us to be a part of your experience there. We would love to bring a workshop or retreat near you. We just need to know who's interested. So those are the announcements. And now it's time for the weekly share. So Margi, why don't I turn it over to you for the weekly share?
The idea of the weekly share is we just literally share a little something that's been bringing us joy, or I guess the minimalists say is adding value to us. So I thought I would share how we've been getting out to know our neighborhood, which has been fun. I'd read an article actually like a year ago about how in the age of sort of vacations, it can be fun to view your local town as a visitor, as a tourist, and to walk it, to look at the things that it has to offer. We've been doing a little bit of that, walking the streets and neighborhoods and eating at local places and hiking our local trails. And it's been super, super fun. So maybe that's something you can do in your kind of neck of the woods, is look at local places or look at things that you haven't done before and get to know your local town as a tourist might. How about you?
Love it. Yeah,
What's your week?
that's been really fun. I agree. That's something that's been really fun. All right. Well, mine is something that I've been looking forward to a long time. It's the following. I don't know how many of you who live in Utah or near Salt Lake City have heard of the Broadway Theater. It's something that's run by the, I don't know, now I'm spacing on the name of the nonprofit that runs it. But the point is, the Broadway Theater shows independent movies downtown. It's on, I think, 3rd South, and I think that street's renamed Broadway. It's kind of, on that same street as Squatters and other places. But anyway, the Broadway Cinema shows amazing movies. And Margi and I went last week, and we went and saw the movie The Big Sick. It's got Mark Ruffalo in it. It has, who is Mark Ruffalo's wife?
It wasn't Mark Ruffalo. You're thinking of...
No, he was the dad.
Mm-mm.
Oh, whoa.
Mark Ruffalo is the Hulk.
Oh.
Ooh. So you're thinking of...
Ray Romano.
Yes,
Ray Romano.
Romano.
And who's the wife?
And then, that is...
Holly Hunter.
Yes.
Holly Hunter. Anyway, it's a delightful movie about a Pakistani American who falls in love with an American girl, Caucasian girl, and what that was like for his family, for her family, and a lot of good themes. It's a Judd Apatow movie, and not only do we love that movie, but we love the fact that the Broadway Theater exists. So please support the Broadway Theater. It's got amazing movies. Julie, do you ever go to the Broadway Theater?
I'm a regular. I love it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I'm a big moviegoer too, in general. So
yeah,
that's great.
So that's my weekly share. Take your significant other to a independent movie and support it, because it's really fun and meaningful and cool.
Yeah, super fun.
All right, so that's the introductions, and now it is time for the main event. We've got 65 people joining us. That's a nice little group of people. The reason why we do these Facebook Live recordings is because we think it's really valuable to have it be interactive. We love it when you guys post questions or comments or experiences, and we want to invite everybody now to please go ahead and Google the article. I guess kudos to the first listener who's able to find this article by Julie DeAzevedo Hanks and to post it into the comments feed. The article is called 30 Questions Nobody Asks My Husband at Church. And what we want people to do is to post questions or comments about the article into the Facebook feed so that we can have a discussion about it. I just found it and I just pasted it in. So those of you watching can reference that. And let's have lots of participation in this conversation. So with that, Julie, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience again for those of them who don't know who you are and what you do and what you're about.
All right, so Julie DeAzevedo Hanks. I am a therapist. I own Wasatch Family Therapy Clinic. And I'm also an author, blogger, really interested in Mormon cultural issues. And I'm also a performing songwriter. And we've talked about that before, John. You can sing a few songs maybe at the end of the show.
Absolutely. I loved your music growing up at BYU.
So yeah, I'm also a married mother of 4. And that's about it. Yeah, I like to play roller derby and work out and read and lay in the sun.
Is there a roller derby team in Salt Lake?
Yeah, there's a few.
Is there a whole league or what?
Oh yeah, all different levels.
So what is roller derby?
Oh, you gotta go. I'll send you a link to watch
Okay.
like the basics of You should totally play. It's really fun.
It's helmets and elbow pads.
Totally.
And
Quad
skates.
skates.
You're going
Quad.
around the circle,
Wow.
right? And usually it's associated with women. Why is it associated with women?
There are male leagues too, but I think historically it was maybe started by women. I'm not sure, but it's pretty fun.
That's
I'm trying
great.
to imagine you as a roller derby queen.
I'm not a queen, but it's fun.
Enjoy it.
All right, your job is to send us a photo of you doing roller derby, and we're going to post it
Oh, totally.
as the photo for this blog post.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I even, for one of the bouts, I got a fake tattoos on my arms. So I actually looked the part. So
I am so seeing why this is fun. Right now.
alter ego. When does a Mormon mother get to have this
Right?
alter ego?
That's
I
great.
love it. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about your article. And at the very top, the first thing that happened is I was trying to put my Mormon brain intact and think about things from my Orthodox Mormon perspective. And in the Mormonism I grew up in, Julie, it was bad to ever discuss anything negative or critical or that even sort of questions the church or its leaders or its culture, any of that stuff. It's sort of just keep it positive or kind of stay quiet. And so for any Orthodox listeners out there, or for anyone who just is in that sort of mindset, do you want to give any disclaimers about why people shouldn't think you're necessarily anti-Mormon because you would write a post like this?
Yes. So working with primarily Mormon clients for 25 years as a therapist, I've seen so many themes and so many patterns in the culture that I write about. And so what I write about is the culture, how we interpret the doctrine, ways that I think we can do better. And so it's really not a critique of the church or the brethren. It's how we are living our religion and ways that we might improve.
And for those who only want to listen to faithful voices, do you want to tell us anything about your relationship with the church?
Yeah, I'm currently active, temple recommend holding, have a church calling. So I'm right there in the midst of it. So,
Yeah.
so stay listening. Well, I hope that doesn't turn off some other listeners. I'm out of
No,
here.
we just lost half our viewers.
I know. We're down to 2 now.
So Julie, what would you say your intention in writing the article was, or your hope, or when you were writing and I know it's been some time, but maybe even going back and trying to connect with that?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I finished my PhD, and it didn't happen a lot, but I'd get a lot of questions like, well, why are you doing that? Or just who's watching your kids while you're in school or working on this, or how, and I've been aware of those kind of questions for a long time because I've been working and being a Mormon woman. And then I've also heard clients tell those stories and things that have maybe been unintentionally hurtful, questions that have been asked. I'm also in a lot of Facebook groups. So in one Facebook group, I said, hey, what are some questions you're asked that your Mormon male counterparts aren't asked? And started compiling a list and then condensing it into common themes. And so that's how the article came about, my own experience and plus bringing in the experiences of others.
Beautiful.
So let's talk about that. You and I were talking before the show started that you and I and Margi, we were kind of raised, I'll just call it in the Ezra Taft Benson world. He's my cousin, so I can talk about him. But he came out with some sort of conference talk or something, or BYU talk while we were at BYU that really seemed to attack Mormon women working. And basically what we all took away from it was that a woman's place is in the home, that she shouldn't be working outside the home, that the kids are going to suffer if a Mormon mom works outside the home, and that it's just the way God wants it. So how in the world did you grow up in that era? Did you learn about those things? Did they affect you? And what made it so that you still felt comfortable from an early perspective pursuing a professional career as a Mormon woman?
Yeah, great questions. Wow, we could do a whole podcast on this, I think. I was aware of that talk, and it had a huge impact on me, and it really was the beginning of me starting to sort out, like, okay, so what is he, I'm hearing this, but what does he really mean? And I kind of reinterpreted it. What he's saying is family is really important, and there's a stewardship there to your kids. So I kind of reframed it in that way. I heard this, and then I felt a very specific spiritual call to do music and to stay in school. And so I was trying to figure out, how am I going to reconcile these things that seem to be opposing? And I realized, through the years, that they don't have to be opposing, because I do value family, and I do care for my children, and I am present for them, and I can do these other things. So I refuse to choose. I refuse that paradigm of either or. And I think part of that is being a creative person. I'm like, there's always a way to figure things out. So for me, I didn't see it as, disregarding that doesn't matter. I took, okay, what is there in that message for me? And that in that message is, family is really, really important. Take care of your family. And nothing else is worth, neglecting your family. But for me, it doesn't mean like working 60 hours a week or home full time. There's been a lot of in between for me, and a lot of flexibility that's worked for my family. So finding my own calling and callings in life has really helped, because we're also taught to get an education, to develop your talents. And in my world, all of those things come together with employment and making money. And so it wasn't as cut and dried as it probably seemed to some.
Yeah.
I love it how you felt empowered enough, committed to your faith, but empowered enough to reframe in ways that worked for you. I imagine there's a lot of women out there maybe that just heard those words and said, oh my gosh, I need to obey. And then they followed a path that maybe wasn't best for them, or maybe wasn't most joyful.
Yeah.
So I love the empowerment in your story.
I know a lot of women who that's part of their story. And I'm not sure, I think it was, I had already been in therapy for 5 years, on and off in my teenage years. And so I think that really, I had a commitment to my own growth, and I knew, okay, nothing is going to, I'm in charge of my life. I'm the boss of me. Even the prophet does not have to answer for my personal choices and what I've done with my life and talents. And so I'm not sure how I got that young, but I'm really grateful, and haven't regretted kind of trying to merge those two things, the prophet's counsel and my own personal revelation.
Love it.
Yeah. So would you say that you had sort of a feminist awakening, or would you say that amidst your journey, you kind of had those pieces already? How would you conceptualize or talk about this idea of gender equality and that theme of empowerment that you seem to have in navigating, and creativity, this sort of feeling that you could create an existence for yourself that really rang true? Do you feel like you've had that inherently, or did you have an awakening of sorts? How did that come about?
Yeah, I've had several awakenings. I think it's been a process, but I recognized in my family of origin that the dynamic that I saw was not going to work for me as a woman. My dad was definitely the one in charge. My parents had 9 children. My mom took care of us, did a great job. And I knew that doesn't call to me. I'm not cut out for 9 children. And I also saw my dad had this permission to use his creativity through music, and he had the power to kind of do the things that he wanted to do. And I thought, well, I want to be like my mom. I do want to have a family. I want to be a mom, and I also want to have creative outlets and feel empowered in my life. So that's kind of been the theme of my life, is how is that possible? And if so, how am I going to figure that out? So the gender differences in the power structure in my home, I kind of was aware of and thought, that's not going to work for me. I've got to figure something else out.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what that would be, or I didn't really have people I could look to model that. Like, can you be a Mormon woman and have a really great, fulfilling personal life and professional life? That was what I hoped to answer.
Yeah.
So I think ordained women and things like that have helped make some strides within the church, but I still think in 2017, feminism is probably a bad word within many circles in Mormonism. How do you feel about that term and that identity for yourself?
I rarely use the word because I think it doesn't mean to people what it means to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it leads to some real disconnection instead of connection. And so I want to talk to a broad range of people. And I think labeling myself as a feminist doesn't allow for that. But would I say I'm a feminist? Yeah. But do I lead with that? No.
Yeah.
That's not like the main part of my identity. Do I believe men and women are equal and should have equal opportunity and they're equally valuable? Yes. I think we would all say yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Really quick, Juliet writes, "You are an inspiration to everyone, Julie." So shout out to Juliet.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so through your time in the church, you've been married how many years now?
28.
28 years, 4 kids, is that right?
4 kids, yeah.
And you've been working outside the home for how many of those 28 years?
The whole time.
The whole time.
Well,
So,
I should say, or in school. So.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yep.
So during those 28 years, do you have some personal stories or some experiences that maybe informed your desire? You mentioned that you did, but are there any you can kind of mention as touch points to help us understand maybe from an emotional or from a heart perspective where this article was coming from personally?
Yeah. When I first became a mom, so I was married at 20 and had my first child at 21. I was in my undergrad and planning on going to grad school. So I had well-meaning people question our choices a lot. Well, you have this baby. How are you going to breastfeed and go to school and do concerts? And it always struck me as not very creative because I'm like, well, we're figuring it out. It's going to be fine. Or who's watching your kids? That always, the wolves are watching my children. It was just like, it felt like a lack of trust in my husband's ability to work out something, to make life choices. And so over the years, I've kind of made note of those comments that made me question myself sometimes, because as a early 20s, I don't know what I'm doing. And so to have, especially older people I respect, question my choices is, it's hard to withstand. Another one was, so we had 2 children and then waited a long time, 9 years later, by choice to have a third. And so there were other questions in there. Well, when are you having your next one? I'm like, do you know we're having another one? Because I didn't know we were having more at that time. And so just kind of intrusive questions consistently throughout my life that made me question myself at times when I felt insecure. And I just thought, we don't need to do that to each other. And I also realized that my husband always got to be the good guy, and I was usually the bad guy, like in the culture. I was neglecting my children by working, but he was providing for his family. And so the frame was often like he's so involved. You're so lucky to have an involved husband. Nobody ever said, you're so lucky to have a wife who can make money. That must be so helpful to you. No one's ever said that to him. And so I started feeling a lot of resentment about some of those differences too. Like, wait, why am I a bad guy? Like, I'm trying to live a good life. I'm trying to follow God's path for me. And I feel like I'm culturally suspect all the time because of my choice. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And so that's some personal stuff behind these questions. And I have been asked a lot of them personally.
Yeah. And there are women who I've met several women who say, if I could only be a full-time stay-at-home mom, not only would I be miserable, but I would not be the best mom that I could be. Do you see that, Julie?
I describe it like this. It's like telling every man you have to be an accountant. It doesn't matter if you want to be a psychologist or a musician. You have to be an accountant, and you will spend the rest of your days as an accountant. That sounds so ridiculous. But I explained it one time to my dad that way. It's like telling a musician you have to be an accountant. If you can't do that to people, I think parenthood is a stewardship for men and women. But there's no right way to do it. And I do think kids need to be taken care of. And that's the message I think that the brethren are trying to give, like, take care of your children. Well, my husband and I have done that creatively, and we've done it together. It hasn't just fallen, just on my shoulders. But I've definitely worked with clients where it is not in their temperament. And I knew at a pretty young age, I have multiple missions, and my challenge is going to be, how do I continue to develop and manifest all of those, including wife and mother, but not, exclusively.
Right.
And I think there's different temperaments, there's different talents. What if you feel like God gave you a specific talent that needs attention? And I've been really sensitive to criticism and questions and those kind of things. And I've asked my older kids, like, did you feel like I was present for you? Because I did have a lot of other things going on. And so far, they said, oh, totally. We knew we could go to you. And so I was like, okay, I guess that's really all that matters is, that they feel like they had the support that they needed from their parents.
I agree. I think that feeling of being loved and feeling secure. And then there's also that gift of actually what happens when a child sees a parent really, like you say, pursuing a life that's theirs, that makes them happy. It gives them this sort of sense that they can do that for themselves too, that they can honor themselves. And I think it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful gift to give them as well.
A couple of years ago, I have a 23-year-old, so she's probably 21. I'm going to cry. I don't have to say this, but she said, she gave me the biggest compliment. She said, Mom, I realize I'm the only person I know who has a mom they want to be like when they grow up. And I just burst into tears, and I said, that was like the prayer of my heart as a teenager. Like, I've got to figure out how to grow up in a way that my daughters are excited to grow up instead of terrified.
Right.
And I just, I couldn't hug her hard enough after that. I'm like, you have no idea, but that was payday right there. So.
That is great. Those moments.
You grew up watching your mom work, didn't you?
I did.
What was that like for you?
Yeah. It was really, really important, and I think very empowering, and it allowed me to see her as more of a human being than just in one role, like kind of existing for me.
Multidimensional.
Yeah, if you will. So.
And it's interesting, you haven't chosen to work outside the home, even though you valued that experience with your mom.
It's true. And as you were talking, I was thinking, how important it is, like, if we're going to talk about an aspect of equality that I just feel really strongly about as women, is this idea of really being able to make choices that truly reflect us and feel right to us, and that we support and respect all women doing that. And that there's not this division or competitiveness or insecurity around those choices, but it's really honestly being able to feel free to make choices that feel good and healthy and true to us.
And ultimately, motherhood is about relationships. It's not about how many hours you work or volunteer or do this or that. It's about a relationship with another human being that's nurturing and helping them to become who they can become. And no matter what category you put people in, the thing that ties everyone together is this important, crucial relationship with a person. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, so I have a question for you with regard to the questions again. Was there a certain catalyst or situation that came about that sort of, made it so that you wanted to sort of write these all out and get them in print? Or was it more like a slow brewing over time? The questions kind of built, you were noticing culturally a slow build that kind of, had a light or a switch that flipped on, and there it was.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it was a little of both. I'd had this brewing going on for decades. And then a couple of years ago, when I went back to grad school to get my PhD, I noticed those questions coming up again. And my husband and I did some he was unemployed for a time and I was working full time and going to grad school. We were just doing a lot of creative family life kinds of things. And so some of those questions arose again. And one was just, well, why are you going to graduate school? And to me, I'm like, do you ever have to have a justification for an education? Really? Like, I don't owe you anything. And so some of those questions that I hadn't had for 20 years came back up again. And so I think that probably was more of the catalyst, the recent catalyst that brought it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's just read a couple comments from our listeners. Donna writes, quote, "Who's watching your children?" End quote. Like you were the only one that should do it. That's what Donna writes. That's obviously one of the main concerns with that question, right? Right, Julie?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and no one asks men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, who's watching your children? No one asks. Who watches them while you go to work? No one. I mean, has anybody asked you that, John?
No one's ever asked me that, Julie.
Okay. Rest my case.
Liz writes, "I just went back to work last year after being home for 12 very lonely years. So much happier. You can't take care of your children if you're lonely / crazy / isolated / depressed / constantly doubting your value due to the lack of positive feedback you get being a stay-at-home mom. Obviously, just speaking to my own experience here." Thank you, Liz. Wasn't that nice of Liz?
Yep.
Yeah.
Anne writes, "I know so many moms who are run down and tired, thinking that ignoring their own wants, needs, and desires will earn them their place in the eternities. I definitely agree that a healthy balance makes for healthy and happy mamas and families. Happy mom, happy kids, right? Happy
Absolutely.
dad, happy parents, happy kids."
Yep.
Okay, a couple more. Melissa writes, "I've seen both very engaged stay-at-home moms and very engaged working moms and very disengaged mothers in both chosen areas." So I guess you can be a stay-at-home mom and very disengaged, or a stay-at-home dad and very disengaged.
Yep.
And vice versa.
Absolutely.
Melanie's saying, "Are you still a member of the church, Julie?"
Yes.
Yes. Melanie acknowledges she joined late. And then Melissa writes, "Being there for your kids is most important in whatever capacity." Okay,
and
so
for men and women,
Right.
the father's place is in the home. The family's place is in, like, we're supposed to be a team, a unit.
That's right.
And it's not just women are in charge of anything related to children. I mean,
what about nurturing? Whose job is it to nurture?
well, define nurturing, because I think providing financially is nurturing. I think tucking kids into bed is nurturing.
It's got to be both, right? It's got to be both.
Right.
Yeah. It's also worth mentioning that more and more women in 2017 have to work. Like, it is very hard to survive anywhere in Utah with any economy on a single income. Is that what you see, Julie? Just a lot of women have no choice?
Well, throughout, here's the thing. Throughout time, women have worked. They worked on the farm. Like, the idea of stay-at-home mom, breadwinner dad is a modern invention that only existed for a little bit of time with the middle to upper class. The lower classes everyone always works to contribute to the family. And I think when we zoom out and look at that context, this discussion of, work, stay at home, it doesn't make any sense. Women are always working, whether they're home working, whether they're outside of the home working. We're all working all the time to provide for our families. And I think we should stop dividing it up, like what kind of work and how we work. And women have always worked. We always do, and we always will. And so do men.
Yep.
I love it. All right.
Okay, so before we head into this questions list that we're so excited to hit, I just wanted to read a bit of your introduction to the list, because it talks about sort of the nature and power of language, questions that we ask, I think oftentimes without really thinking about the language, or even the assumptive quality of the questions we may be asking. So a quote from Julie before she started the questions: although never, or very, very rarely, meant to be intentionally judgmental, the questions we ask and to whom we direct our questions often contain powerful cultural assumptions. Seemingly benign questions have the potential to convey a disapproving and limiting message. And I love that. I just love that idea. Yeah, I was going to say, back in college, I got really passionate about an author, Mary Pfeiffer. She wrote a couple of books. One of them is Reviving Ophelia. And one of the things I loved most about her is this idea. She's, I believe, a therapist, but she takes a very anthropological view of culture and looking at women in our culture. And I just love this idea of, can we exist and really be contributing to a culture that we also can step back from and really look at objectively, and assess whether it's healthy, and in which ways it's healthy, and in which ways we may be limiting ourselves. And you're reminding me of that here. You're taking part of this culture, you give to this culture, you value this culture, and still want to ask some questions about, is our culture really, really, as aware and healthy as it should and could be for all participating sort of, members. Anyway, I just thought I would share that.
So are questions just questions? Sometimes with Margi, I would do that. I would say it's just a question, as if questions are just purely innocent and
neutral,
aren't a problem. Don't worry about the ringing. It's fine.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't worry.
So
our question's just a question.
No, there's always context. There's always context. So no, I don't think it's ever just the words. There's meaning behind the words. There's assumptions. And so I'd say no.
And questions can be hurtful, even if they're intended well, right?
Right.
All right, so let's jump in. What we did is we categorized your 30 questions into, 6 or 7 groups. And so Margi and I are going to take turns kind of discussing some of the questions in the context of a grouping.
Okay.
So take it away, sweetie.
That.
Okay, so the first grouping we have is sort of church, women, and authority. So I thought, let's talk about maybe the assumption or the issue that lies underneath some of these questions, if you will. Okay, so we'll just take you through some of them. So the first question: did you know that you're a son of your heavenly mother? So
doesn't that sound
foreign?
It sounds so foreign, but how sad that it sounds so foreign, given the doctrine that we know we have a heavenly mother. So how many times women are told, do you know that you're a daughter of Heavenly Father? Which is true, but we're missing this other piece. And so I think that question highlights, like, okay, so what about this Heavenly Mother? Can we get more information here? Can we talk about her and acknowledge her?
Yes. So why do you need to know more about your Heavenly Father? Of course he exists, and isn't that enough?
Is that one Heavenly Mother? Why do you need to know more about Heavenly Mother? Of course she exists?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm like, wait, is that one? Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Like, there's the folk myths that, she's being protected. Just, that she exists. Why do you care? Why do you need to know more? It's like, well, why do you need to know more about Heavenly Father? I mean, if they're both gods, then, it seems like it's out of balance.
So true.
And what would it be like? God can be such a powerful influence in someone's life. How would it affect both men and women to have a more prominent deity who is female as their supreme being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So cultures who have female deity have greater gender equality.
Right.
So somehow our image of God is reflected in how we see and treat each other. And so that's why I think developing and highlighting Heavenly Mother is so important, because it changes how we see ourselves and how we treat each other.
Yeah, so true. How about the why do you want to go on a mission?
So the assumption that all men want to go on a mission, right? But people ask women if they choose to go on a mission. Well, why do you want to go on a mission? As if it would be any different than the reasons a man would go on a mission.
Yep. So true. What are you bringing to the ward potluck dinner tomorrow?
This one seems out of place in this grouping, but
I think it goes more with gender.
It's kind of like what the church is expecting of people in their specific roles, right?
Yeah. So I put that in there because my husband does more cooking than I do, but no one ever sends rolls around elders quorum or high priests for what they're going to bring at the next, to the next potluck, right? You just assume food is a woman's place, and that's just not the case anymore, and it's not the case in my house. It's more Jeff.
Right. Sometimes men are phenomenal cooks. Sometimes women don't like to cook. Sometimes they're not good cooks. Sometimes people divide roles or they split it out, right?
And we benefit from that fluidity. We all benefit.
Right.
Some of my most special moments with my kids are cooking with them.
Yes.
Oh.
Yep.
You just went up a notch in my book, John.
It's so true, but that's also, I remember reading a lot of research about healthy marriages, and that the fluidity of sort of men that do traditionally feminine tasks in the home, right? That builds intimacy. Those are happier marriages.
Mm-hmm. And better relationships with the kids, because it's that hands-on doing instead of just the distant father.
Right. And healthy modeling. Mm-hmm. Not like work I won't do. I don't do that.
Right. Because what does that say about the value of that of what is traditionally called feminine work? What if a man's not willing to do it? It's like, okay, that says a lot.
Yep.
Aaron writes, this one drives me crazy because my husband can cook well and no one ever asks the men to cook. I definitely plan on teaching my sons to cook well. That's from Aaron. Kimberly writes, our mostly very old traditional ward, to their credit, invited men to participate in a ward potluck, which was semi-disastrous, but everyone loved it. Can you imagine men being responsible for the potluck meals?
Yes, I can, because my husband is the one that usually brings the things for the parties. And, he makes Sunday dinners. He's the one that makes special meals for our family. So I totally can, but I guess.
And wouldn't that be so awesome for the Thanksgiving ward thing or ward Christmas
party?
Priesthood that's actually doing
and serving people.
Organizing.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Delane writes, Julie was my secret crush back in the 80s. I think it was when her dad came and spoke and performed at Rick's.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, I'm blushing.
All right. No, that's good. And he also says he loves to do more cooking than his wife. So thank you, Delane. So these questions, some may be confused by these questions because I think what you did is you rewrote them in ways where they're reversed such
gender
that they,
swap.
Yeah. So Margi, go ahead and read this question because it is gender swap, but then Julie can read what the original
the original
intent directed to women.
So the gender swap is, I've already checked with your wife and she said it's okay. So can you accept this new calling?
Yeah. So frequently in the church, leaders will consult a husband like, hey, I would like to call your wife to this. Is that kind of asking permission? Right. Which is, we're talking about adults here, right? And it's one thing to ask them both together in the same room,
right?
And ask one to support, but to check ahead of time, that's never happened to me, but that was one that's happened to other people that I know and was brought up in a Facebook group. And I thought, yeah, that would not go over so well.
So
it happened to me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is good. Those are some of the questions around women, church, and authority. Now let's move to the topic of education. So the first one that we have from you is, you got married so young and still graduated from college. You must have an incredibly supportive wife. So how is that? Talk about how women get the reverse of that.
Yeah. So you got married so young and you still graduated. Your husband must be so great that he would support you through that. Like that was like he had an option of whether to do that, right?
Right.
So it's assumed that the wife is going to support the husband's education, but it's like bonus if the husband supports the wife. And I just don't think it should be like that.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. How about the next one? Why are you getting a graduate degree? Yeah. I have 3 graduate degrees. No one ever asked me that question.
Never?
Never.
Oh, I was asked that frequently during my master's, and then I was asked that recently during my PhD. And I get why people ask. I mean, they're curious because it's not something. I mean, I think I was the only woman in our neighborhood or state that was working on a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that it's rare, but to ask that, it kind of invalidates or negates. And the fact that you don't get asked that, John, that says something, right? Like, well, of course the husband, the man's going to get the graduate degree. And so, yeah, that one bugged me.
Heather writes, when I decided to start law school with 5 kids at home, I was bombarded with all sorts of awful comments. I got the normal, why do you want to do that? Especially because you don't need the money. Or will you be the reason your marriage fails or kids end up bad? Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
That is awful. And can you imagine saying that to a man? Like, if you go to law school, your marriage will fail, your kids will all go off the deep end, and,
Yeah. Heather continues, no one ever said that to my husband, even though he was basically unavailable for a decade for medical school, residency, and fellowship. So there's a bit of a double standard, right?
Right, exactly. Oh, that breaks my heart. It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, why can't we just go, oh, that's amazing. Tell me more about that.
Right.
Cool. That's what led you to that decision. That's amazing. Why can't we just be excited?
Heather, this is a little heartbreaking. Heather continues, on another note, when we moved into a new ward and the bishopric found out about my grad school and then law school, they would not give me a calling until I kept demanding one. But it took 9 months for her to get a calling. The reasoning was that I was already so busy and they wanted to think about the effect on the family. It was not lost on me that no bishop anywhere would have withheld a calling from my husband, even though he's working 80 to 100 hours a week in training. Wow, that's intense.
Whoa.
Heather, thank you for sharing something so personal. Heike writes, that's a bit of a double standard. She's making fun of me for saying a bit of a double standard. Okay, a lot of a double standard. Thanks, Heike. All right, next question related to education. If you get an advanced degree, this is that men are never asked. If you get an advanced degree, aren't you worried your wife might feel intimidated?
So many women feel like they need to hold back, to not reach their potential, to not talk about the fact that they have a graduate degree because their, future husband might find that intimidating. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. And yet no one would say that to a man, right? Oh, don't go to med school. Your wife will be so intimidated. I mean, that sounds so ridiculous when you switch it.
So just to push back a bit, what if there are insecure Mormon men that are troubled if their wife, shows up to be more intelligent or more capable or even a better breadwinner? What would you say to a Mormon man who is raised Orthodox with very kind of rigid gender roles that actually is turned off or insecure about that disparity in power?
Yeah, well, they probably wouldn't marry a woman like that, right? That would challenge, or I'd say you need to get a therapist. Mm-hmm. And if you really love this person, this is really about your own insecurities and not anything about her accomplishments.
Yeah.
Right. Very good. Okay. Last question that men never get asked around education. Have you considered going back to school so you have something to fall back on in case something happens to your wife?
I've heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So education is often framed for women as something to fall back on in case an emergency, instead of developing your talents, fulfilling your life's mission, preparing professionally. That there's validity to school just because education is good, and not just in case, in case something happens. So yeah, no one's ever said that, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just add that in our Cache Valley ward, you may remember this, not to pick on anyone, but there was a real sense that men went on to college and get degrees and become professionals. And women, if you go to college, it's maybe for a year or two. It's mostly to find a boy and to get married. You want to have kids as soon as possible. And if you get a degree, get elementary education, because that's something you can do for those first couple of years while you're waiting for kids. And then you can put your husband through school, but then you're going to be doing the role of motherhood. And I just felt, why shouldn't women be taught you can do anything?
Mm-hmm.
And to what extent, even in 2017, are women being sold short within Mormonism by being sort of channeled into motherhood at the expense of true education, graduate school, and even career
Self-development. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that women who make that choice and feel like that is their path, like, I have tons of respect. Everybody's path is different. I also know that realistically, and in my clinic, I've seen this so often, that it leaves women in a vulnerable position.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a reason why so many more women and children live in poverty than men.
Yeah.
Because women are often not prepared to go into the workforce, and they're often the primary caregivers. There's those assumptions. And so I think it's so important to have skills, and for self-development, and also for protection, for survival, for living, being able to live as an adult, right? Being self-sufficient. So, and I hope this doesn't come across as putting down stay-at-home moms, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom and she did an amazing job and made an amazing contribution. And for my daughters, I hope that they will get an education or get training and continue to develop themselves, even if and when they have a family.
Yeah, my mom is a stay-at-home mom. Margi is a stay-at-home mom. I just, not that I'm feeling defensive, but I just want to be clear. I deeply revere and respect stay-at-home moms. I think that is one of the hardest and most amazing and powerful jobs that someone could have. My concern about what I saw in that Cache Valley ward is that women weren't prepared for the realities of life and weren't encouraged to live out their full potential in whatever way they might desire. And instead, it was sort of like they were cattle card into a low grade education or no education and immediate marriage and child rearing at the expense of getting to know themselves and pursuing their best path for them. That's kind of
I think for me that's what it comes down to too, is this idea of having choices. Really, it's great to be a stay-at-home mom if it's a choice that you make and you literally have all these choices and you've self-developed so that you know what you want out of life, you know your temperament, you know what your wounds are and what works best for you, right? You have that level of sort of that maturity. It's another thing if it's a formula, and really what you're doing is you're disconnected from yourself and you're following this formula that in the end leaves you with it. You can make some of those hard choices later. It's more difficult, right? It's harder at that point, more complicated.
And I think a big problem with the paradigm that you're talking about is this either or, that it's school or marriage, or that it's career or family. And that just does not compute in my brain. For me, it was like, well, I want a family and I'm going to go to school and I want to, it's not an either or.
Yes.
You can finish school. I had one kid in undergrad, one kid in grad school, 4 kids when I went back for my PhD. It's not one or the other. And I think that thinking really limits us more than anything else.
A couple more quick comments, then we'll go to the next section. My buddy Chase from Cache Valley, he writes, this was one of the most frustrating things for me when I was dating in the church. I wanted to find a girl that was smart and ambitious, but they all felt that they needed to dumb themselves down and not take their future too seriously until they were married. That was Chase's experience. Kimberly is being very vulnerable. She writes, even though education was important in my family, I was taught to see it as a backup plan and always felt my education was less important than my husband's. Sadly, all these years later, my quote backup plan would not be sufficient for me to provide for my family, even if I ever needed to.
Right.
So women, feel free to get an education and to pursue a career if that's what your soul.
And I love this message that it's never too late. You know, I like this idea that you can do both, and coming together with your spouse and being creative and working as a true partnership to sort of answer some of these needs or desires, or, you know.
Well, and also, expecting your kids to support you. So often women are looked at as the person that supports the rest of the family. And in a lot of times that's the case, but I require my kids to support me. They know I have things going on and that I'm going to need more support from them at different times. When I was working on my dissertation, it was like, okay, you guys, you're on your own for this. Don't interrupt me for the next 3 hours. And they had to be more resourceful and do it on their own. And so I just think we don't often expect enough of our kids sometimes, that they need to know that they can contribute to our lives.
Yeah.
I love it. Couple more quick comments because these are really good. Melissa writes, the joke in our house for our 14-year-old daughter is she can't come home from college until she at least has a master's degree. I never want her to depend on a man. That's Melissa's perspective with her daughter. Gigi writes, I followed the formula after disconnecting from myself and not taking the time to know my temperament or wounds.
Yeah. Shouldn't
college be a time, Julie, where women really take the time to get to know themselves and to figure out what would be best for them, what they would want?
Yes, definitely. And our brains are not fully developed until the mid-20s. Right. So there's so much brain development going on. And that is a great time to get to know yourself during those young adult years.
And not just in the way of even schooling. It can be travel. It can be experiences or service abroad, or, really trying on different ways to live.
And different relationships, right? Dating different people, seeing what who you're really attracted to, what qualities really matter, and not just this checklist of like, okay, do they have this? Okay, let's get married.
So true. Because don't you find oftentimes what you look for or what you value at 19 changes on a dime when you're 26, right? You're looking for something quite different at 26 than 19.
Yes.
Final comment for now. Gary reminds us that not everyone has a negative or unenlightened experience in their Mormon wards. Gary writes, my wife went to medical school in 1979 to 83, residency 83 to 86, National Health Service Corps 86 to 90. I was the house husband for 12 years before going back to school for a master's in counseling. Amazing that during that whole time, we felt supported by ward leaders.
It's beautiful, Gary.
Lovely.
Yeah.
He says we had 4 kids when she started med school and had 2 more before finishing residency.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love it.
So Gary, we love that you had a good experience, and we hope lots of people have
that's what we want.
Similarly good experiences.
Great.
Shout out to Liz, who writes, she's a 20-year stay-at-home mom who went to medical school after 20 years. I grew up with Liz's family, so I know Liz. So.
Oh, cool.
All right.
Terrific.
So gender roles.
So yes, next cluster. So the question again flipped, how does your wife feel about you working?
So this is about work.
It's never asked, right?
Right.
Husband.
So husbands are frequently asked, well, how do you feel about your wife working outside of the home? Like it's this suspect kind of behavior.
Right.
And that ties into the next one. Oh, so you're a working father. Right.
Right?
That for working father, it doesn't exist as a thing.
It doesn't. I've never
So
thought of
true.
that. The word
So
doesn't
true.
even exist.
It doesn't. It's like you just make that assumption. And so I just think it's just problematic. Why working mother? There's just mothers and fathers, parents.
So true.
So Margi has a quote that she wanted to read. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so, we watched this documentary called Misrepresentation. It's on Netflix, and it talks about sort of females and how we're depicted culturally through media in particular. Really, really great. I recommend it. Watched it with, did you end up watching it? I watched it with Clara. My other older daughters have watched it. And Nancy Pelosi had a quote, and as I was reading through this particular question, it reminded me of her quote. The question that you gave is basically, how do you feel about someone else raising your child, right? A question a man would not really be asked, right? Nancy writes, when I first ran for public office, although my son was a senior in high school, the question I was most frequently asked was, who's going to be taking care of your children? And of course, it's one of those questions that I don't think a man has ever been asked when he has run for office. I just thought that was right.
Bingo, right there.
So how about you're employed because you have to, right?
Right. So in Mormon culture, there's this thing like, work if you have to, and the only reason you would have to is for financial reasons. Like that's only legitimate reason.
Right.
And can you imagine saying that to a man? Like, you have to. Well, like, of course I have to provide. Well, women provide too. Women provide money for their family. No one would ask a man. You have to.
And the assumption too that would be the only reason why we would work would be
right.
many reasons actually to work.
Right. But that's the only culturally legitimate
one.
Yeah.
So have you told your boss that you're quitting after the baby's born?
So can you imagine asking a man that? I had someone, actually this is a while ago, a really dear friend, and I just was like, because I'm starting my own practice after the baby's born. I'm not quitting. I'm actually like opening a business.
Yeah.
It was kind of an interesting question.
I bet. Oh, how do you balance it all? There's a bit of a.
I've never been asked that.
Right.
I've been asked
how do you balance? How do you
do it?
Podcasting, family, your practice, your research. What's your secret?
Yes. That is so true.
When I'm asked that, it's within the context of work. It's like, how do you do all the things you do at work?
Yeah. I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked that. And I'm like, balance what? Like life? Like what do you, that question makes no sense to me.
Right.
Well, everybody's just doing life.
Yeah. Do you really think your special gifts are best used in the world of commerce, politics, and higher education?
What's that about? What's that question about, Julie?
Oh, just trying to box women into the private sphere is the only place women can make a contribution. And women can make a great contribution in the private sphere, and so can men. And women can make a contribution in the public spheres. And so it's just kind of pointing that out, like how ridiculous that sounds.
And don't you feel bad for accepting that job? It could be taking you away from a woman who needs to support her family.
Mm-hmm. So I've known
job away from
taking a job away. So I know of so many women who've had people say that, well, you're taking a spot in med school from a man who needs to support his family, or a man could have that spot in law school and he's going to need to support his family, right?
Got it.
No one ever says that to a man, like, you're taking a spot away from a woman in med school.
Interesting, right? So true. And then what does your wife do for a living? A question that,
No one ever asks my husband that.
Yeah.
I just ask him what he does for a living. And and I stand there and
Boy, do I just try to stay away from that question. I'm like, what do you love? Just,
Tell me about your life.
that's right.
Just
What do you love? What interests
Tell me
you?
about your life. There
Right.
you go.
All right.
All right. The next category, this is just one question, life decisions. The question is, you have somebody else clean your house?
Right. So I have a cleaning crew that comes twice a month. Our family has one, and I know other people who do. And there's that kind of like, you're not a true Mormon woman if you have that. And you think about it, people just assume that, men aren't cleaning their houses, right?
Right.
You let Margie clean your house, John? Oh my gosh. I would never trust her.
So true.
All right, let's check in with our listeners. Courtney writes, I leave behind a decade of full-time domestic role, wifing and mourning, to start law school this fall. Oh, momming.
Mm-hmm.
So wifing and momming to start law school this fall as my youngest is off to kindergarten. Good job, Courtney. Why have I been surprised to hear the chatterings of ward members? Quote, she's going to school because her marriage is in shambles, end quote, et cetera, et cetera. I am heartened to see conversations like this happening. More and more are needed. Thank you, Courtney. Glad you enjoy it. Good luck in law school.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Looks like she's at the University of Idaho. So go Vandals. Linda DeAzevedo says hello. Do you have a sister named Linda?
It's my mom.
That's your mom.
Hi,
Hey,
Mom.
Mom. Hey, Mom, Linda. We love you.
I love my mom.
Okay. Amy Grubbs writes, I am asked this all the time. Unfortunately, I'm not sure which thing she's referring to, but Amy's been working. Amy is another person. We'll have to have her on Mormon Stories soon.
Mm-hmm.
She is the director of operations for the Open Stories Foundation. And she's been she's been a working mom for as long as she's had a child. And she's been a working woman for her entire adult life. 20 plus years experience at Utah Valley University doing higher education. Now she works for us. We're super lucky. But shout out to Amy. Now Felix writes something that may feel kind of harsh. I'm curious what your reaction would be. Felix writes, women in the church are second-class members. How do you feel about a statement like that, Julie?
Well, I think it goes to the next question on our list. Do you know how special you are?
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell someone they're special.
Yep.
Then you're not showing them that they're valued.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to actually call someone's attention to it. So I don't believe the doctrine teaches that. I believe the culture often treats women, like our interpretation and how we actually work things out here does, that is the case.
Okay. Yeah.
Allie writes, something that is quite bothersome is when people, particularly family, assume that when I'm teaching any one of my 4 daughters life skills, I'm preparing them to be good mommies and homemakers. Those comments are the worst. The assigning of predetermined gender roles can be harmful to young people who believe they can be and achieve anything. Boxing them into a singular role is quite defeating. That goes along with value, right, Julie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that applies to men too. Boxing men into this narrow view of masculinity. You have to, be tough, be strong, make a ton of money, have a lot of toys, be just uber powerful positions in the church. That boxes men in too. So it goes both ways.
Do you want to make a plug for the Mask You Live In?
Yes. So along with misrepresentation, there's another documentary that is talking about all the things you talked about and more, called The Mask You Live In. Again, another Netflix stream. So valuable about really the value in letting males be whole people as opposed to emotionally shutting them down. At a young age, teaching femininity is something that you don't want to be like. Don't run like a girl. Don't the ways of talking. Anyway, both are great, very needed documentaries about how we could do better as a society, treating each other as whole people and getting away from this feminine and masculine kind of talk, honestly, into just an array of qualities, really.
Integration is health.
Yep.
So what about this question? Do you know that your greatest possession is your virtue?
Oh, I've heard this one.
So that speaks to the sometimes obsessive way we talk about chastity and women, young women. And I just think that to say that to a man, no one would say that to a man. Like, your greatest possession, John, is your virtue. Like, you laugh, right? But how many times have women been told that? It's like, no, that's not.
What would you list before virtue, Julie?
Let's see. Yourself is your greatest, like, your humanity, your sense of self, I would say.
Yeah, your connection to yourself, to your dreams, to the things that bring you joy, to contribution.
Right. Your life is your greatest possession.
Yeah. Yep.
I love it.
All right, on to appearance, dress, modesty. That sort of, don't let yourself go after you have kids. You don't want your wife to start looking elsewhere, do you? Yeah.
So women have heard the reverse of that, right? Don't let yourself go, your husband. But it sounds ridiculous when you say it to a man.
Right.
I've never heard that said to a man. But that speaks to it's a woman's job to keep her husband happy and interested. Right. And if he strays, it's her fault because she hasn't lost that baby weight, or she hasn't kept herself up.
That's particularly egregious because having babies is so brutal. Not all women have babies, but for those that do, having babies is so brutal on the body, right? And the mind and the spirit. It's extremely hard to have babies, it turns out, from what I hear.
It's a journey unto itself, I would say, I also really feel like it falls into that pitfall about appearance. That's what it makes me feel like, is your value is just sort of in your sexual appeal or in that sort of role. Particularly just.
What are your comments on that, Julie, about appearance?
Oh yeah, just Western cultures focus on the external, the appearance, looking perfect. And then I think that pressure is still there after you have kids. And like you said, your body's never the same. Like, unless you get your mommy makeover, then you get your body back. But that's another podcast.
That occasionally happens in Utah.
Occasionally, according to billboards.
And that's another thing where the expectation is simply not grounded in the reality of biology and like how a body works after you have a baby, all of the changes that are going on, Right. So, will you go home and change? Your clothes are distracting the sisters.
So have you ever known a young boy or a woman who were told to go home and change because they were distracting? Their shirt was too tight and their pecs were just,
right.
Were too tight. I mean, we never comment or rarely comment on what boys are wearing. And it's a frequent conversation with women. There's no, like, oh, you're, kneel down, your dress has to hit the ground. There's no equivalent of that for a male.
Right.
And boys can wear shorts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we included, just so that you could respond, a comment that we found on the LDS Living website. There was a comment, and it was, as a woman, I have never been asked to go home and change because my clothes were distracting. Perhaps because I've always chosen appropriate clothing to wear. How would you respond to that, Julie?
Good for you. Way to go. And just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it hasn't happened to other women who are also wearing appropriate clothing.
Right.
So that's how I would respond.
Right. And I also think there's a bit of an assumptive quality there too, that as women, we're responsible for men's response to us with what we wear, which just simply is not true.
Right. That's your job, to not distract,
right?
To not entice or
right.
Stir up any kind of sexual
feelings that are
because that's that's a huge one. That it's the women's job to protect males from their sexuality.
Yep.
All right. Another question men never get asked is around parenting now. Who's watching your kids?
So you're out and about, or you're traveling for work, or
Yeah. No one asks men that, but women get asked that all the time. When I'm going and speaking out of state, well, who's going to watch your kids? Well, my husband, like, our nanny,
Babysitter.
yeah. And just to be asked that, like, again, it's just like, am I not capable to figure this out? Like, are you really worried about my kids? No, it's more of a judgment or curiosity. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but.
Yeah.
All right. This is the last question from your list. Do you realize how blessed you are that your wife will babysit for you?
Okay. So husbands.
That's something a man never hears.
Right. Your wife is babysitting, but women hear, oh, you're so lucky your husband will babysit for you. Or, oh, my husband's babysitting tonight. It's like, well, you're paying him to watch his own. That language makes no sense. And it's also condescending to men. That, like, really, you can't parent. It's like this favor to take care of your own children.
Yep.
Yeah. It's called parenting. It's not called babysitting.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right. So those are the 30 questions, and it's been fun to review them. Margi, you had a question for Julie specifically in relation to these.
Yeah, I was unsure about the ages of your children, but I was curious how these sort of observations over the years have affected the conversations that you've had with your children. So at first I was going to say daughters, but then I was saying, and equally important, sons.
If not more important.
Right.
I'll share a story with you. This was a few years ago. I have a 14-year-old. He was probably about 10, 11. He inherited a bigger bed. And so the only bedding that fit on that was this floral bedding. So we put that on there, and I said, hey, we can go shopping this week and get something that's, more your style or whatever. And he's like, oh, no, Mom, I love this. It's so soft. And I'm comfortable with my manhood. I knit, I sew, I play football, I play lacrosse.
Yeah.
And he kept this blue and green floral bedding for years on his bed. I was like, yes.
Hallelujah.
Integration is health.
Right.
Yay. That he was just like, oh, I'm like this. It didn't threaten his maleness in any way.
Right.
That was kind of a little victory as a mom who's aware of this kind of stuff.
And especially at that age.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I giggled, I'm still giggling over that one. But we talk a lot about stereotypes and how people are portrayed. And one of my kids was like, did you notice that on this poster, it only portrays older people doing family history? As if only older people can do family history. Like,
right.
Like, be thinking about how images impact us and what it says about you. And, can kids do family history? Yeah. And so just making explicit the gender messages and all, the other kinds of messages that we get, because they impact us. So our only choice is to actually have conversations about it or just let those messages sink in.
Right. So important. Yeah.
Margi pulled one final comment from LDS Living that sort of represents one possible male response to this article. I'll read it. One of your commenters wrote, I call BS. I have been asked a lot of those questions, probably over half of them. And newsflash, there are actual differences between men and women that would make some of these questions more legit one way versus the other. Unless you want to live in a society, Julie, with no norms or mores, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Oh my goodness.
Mic drop.
Oh yeah, there you boom. Okay, I'm speechless. I'm just speechless.
We got you there, Julie.
Oh my gosh. So yes, are there differences between men and women? Yes. Those differences are so much smaller than we think. There are very few differences, actually. And a lot of the gender differences have to do with socialization. Go figure. So no, I'm not for a just everything goes society, but I am for a sensitive society. And I really don't care if cats and dogs live together. I don't get that one.
Right.
That makes no sense to me.
Right.
But yes, and men are asked some of these questions, but the point is to take the questions that women are asked and flip them, and they sound actually ridiculous. A lot of them are ridiculous. So it's not that I think men have never been asked these questions.
Yeah, not the point.
Right, not the point.
Casey reminds us, it feels that if you're a curvy woman in the church, the rules are also different.
Yeah.
Because something looks different or tighter, you are seen as suggestive, even if what you are wearing is technically appropriate.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Amen. I've seen that so often, and I've heard heartbreaking stories about that, where I have a friend, and she says, my daughter has a body like Jessica Rabbit, and no matter what she wears, she looks sexy, and there's nothing she can do about it. And so do we punish those girls and make them, wear, baggy, long, everything? Yeah, no.
Because oftentimes it will translate into body shame, which is really unfortunate. Which
who doesn't have that already?
Yes.
The culture doesn't need to be shaming any more than we already have to deal with.
Julie, we're showing our age when we make a Jessica Rabbit reference. I'm not sure anybody.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Millennials are
Gotcha,
like
Julie.
Jessica Rabbit. Who's Jessica?
I know. This is all you have to say right there.
36, 12, 36, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Matt writes, I'm just kidding, by the way. I just thought that'd be funny to.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Matt Glauser writes, wow, this whole conversation is so foreign outside of Utah. Mormons outside of Utah don't get all these gender questions of parenting because all their neighbors are non-Mormons and they have to relate to them. I bet most of these questions mostly come from Utah Mormons. What say you about that, Julie?
I say probably a lot of them, but not exclusively, because I compiled this list from people who live all over the world. So, but definitely there is a Mormon culture that's unique to Utah, where things are probably magnified because of the homogenous group that we have here. So I would say some of that's fair, but it's everywhere.
I kind of disagree with Matt. Agree with him maybe if you're talking a really cosmopolitan place like New York or LA or San Francisco. But, I grew up in Houston and Dallas. Margi and I have lived in DC and Seattle,
Chicago,
and Chicago. And in every ward we've lived in, and maybe it's Utahns that moved to other states, but those wards carry very strongly and conservatively traditional Mormon mores, especially if you live in the suburbs of these big cities. Is that your experience?
I agree. Mm-hmm.
It still feels very Mormon in those suburban non-Utah wards.
Yeah, that's my experience too.
But Matt, you're probably right to some extent.
Definitely amplified, maybe.
Matt says he lives near Boston, and I would guess is Boston maybe one of those more progressive cities.
I could see that.
And yeah, Matt says he's been out of the church a long time. But I'm not trying to invalidate your point, Matt. I'm just saying some non-Utah wards can feel very Orthodox, is my experience. Let's see. Felix writes, the church has not been very successful baptizing people, so they need program women to get married as soon as possible to have lots of children for the glory of Zion. Maybe not. Let's see. Liz writes, I love it that dogs and cats living together is the ultimate evil if we follow the trajectory of gender equality.
That's what's waiting for us.
That's actually a Chevy Chase. To show our age, doesn't that come from the movie Fletch with Chevy Chase? Dogs and cats sleeping together?
I don't know.
All right, listeners.
I don't know.
Bonus points if listeners can post as a comment the reference to dogs and cats sleeping together. But Liz, you get the award for the comment of the day. That was a great comment. Chase writes, heaven forbid men should learn to control their own thoughts instead of blaming it on women. Susan and Kara say it's a Ghostbusters quote.
Melissa.
Melissa too. It's the dogs and cats sleeping together. Chadley writes, California is just as bad when your social group revolves around the church. So that's another comment in response to Matt. Savannah writes, here in Texas, most of my non-LDS friends hold high education degrees and work. She's the oddball out. Gigi writes, she lives in Southern Alabama and doesn't associate with any Mormons. She's often asked what she does for work. That's cool. And then Jesse writes, I grew up in rural Missouri and the culture is probably worse. That's something I think we forget oftentimes as Mormons. Places like Iowa and Indiana and Nebraska, some places in the South, can actually be way worse in terms of conservatism or bigotry. Would you say that, Julie?
You know, I've only lived in Salt Lake City and LA. So, but if you've lived there, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a larger culture that I think can reinforce some of those things, especially in the South.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so Julie, we have one final question for you. What will make things better? So things aren't where they need to be. How can we make things better?
I think just being aware of our gender assumptions and like developing a mindfulness around this. And I think part of it is knowing what to say instead. Like instead of saying, oh, you know, are you a stay-at-home mom or a working mom? Like, tell me about your life. Like learning how to ask open-ended questions instead of just closed, assumptive questions. It will make things a lot better. Tell me about your life. It's just such a great, because you could say, oh, I have children, or I don't have children, or I have cats and dogs, or I work, or I, whatever. Letting people define their own life, I think that would be a huge gift to everybody.
What do you think, Margie? How do we make it better?
So agree. I agree with Julie. I really feel like it's a sensitivity and awareness around our own blind spots, those parts of ourselves where we're just not seeing a whole person in front of us, you know?
Yeah. And I want to add to that too, just knowing that the way we think about things isn't necessarily the right thing, the right way, or the only way. Like the way we've done life is one way, but it's not the right or the only.
Yeah, one thing I love to say that's just sort of comforting to me is there are so many ways to parent right, to mother right, to live right, there are as many ways, honestly, as human beings. And freeing that up a little bit, especially that mindset when it feels really, really limiting and controlled and suffocating, really freeing that up.
Amen.
I love it. All right. So keep fighting the good fight, Julie DeAzevedo Hanks.
We appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. This has been so delightful.
Plug your 2 upcoming workshops, retreats one more time.
Yeah. Next Wednesday, the 26th, 9 to 4 at the U. I'm doing a Sunstone pre-conference called Finding Your Voice as a Mormon Woman. And then on August 11th and 12th, John and I are doing a mixed faith marriage retreat for couples where one is on the way out or out of the faith and one's still in. And we've had a really great response. So grab your spot if you're interested, because we're filling up fast.
Terrific.
And if people want to, seek you out for coaching or for therapy or your practice, do you want to plug that really quick?
Oh, sure. Yeah. drjuliehanks.com, drjuliehanks.com. And for the workshop, if it's /voice is where you'll get the information for the Finding Your Voice workshop. And then wasatchfamilytherapy.com is my practice website.
All right. Well,
terrific.
Julie, welcome back. Thanks for joining us on Mormon Stories. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
We love
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Margie. Thanks, John.
And listeners, just want to thank everyone. Your comments and questions carried this episode to an extra level. Julie's always awesome. Margie's always amazing. And your comments and questions made it even more amazing.
So true.
So listeners, thank you so much for your comments and questions. It's been great having you. For those of you who support Mormon Stories or the Open Stories Foundation, please know your support is what makes all this possible. For those of you who benefit or value these programs, whether it's Mormon Matters, A Thoughtful Faith, Mormon Transitions, Mormon Mental Health, or Mormon Stories, please consider making a $10 or $15, $20 a month contribution, whatever you can afford. There are always people canceling because they move on, they lose interest, they do other things. So it's not just a foregone conclusion that these episodes and programs will continue. If people don't step up and continue supporting, they go away. So please continue supporting us. Please check out mormonstories.org/events for any events coming to your area. And please tune in again soon for another episode with my brilliant and wise and beautiful wife, Margi.
Oh, thank you. We can't wait to see you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining, sweetie.
Thanks, babe.
All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you guys soon.